What's going on, guys? Today we're talking about 1.5 reps, also referred to at times as 1.25 reps. This is a rep scheme and a tool that I think every lifter should have in their toolbox because when employed with strategy, it can be really useful for tackling certain goals. So today we're breaking down what 1.5 reps are, some of the benefits that come along with them, how to program them, and some common mistakes to avoid. So in the most simplistic way of defining 1.5 reps include reps that are performed with a half range of motion and an entire range of motion rep. So it's going to include 2 movement patterns into one singular rep. So let's say we're doing a dumbbell incline bench press. That would look like at lockout, we're coming down to the eccentric to the bottom, pressing up halfway, stopping, coming back down to the hole, and then finishing our locked out press. So that 1.5 range of motion would count as a 1.5 rep. So 1 rep in a set that calls for 1.5 reps will include 1 full range of motion rep with a half range of motion rep. So there are 3 key benefits that I think come along with 1.5 reps. And obviously there are more benefits out there, but these are my big 3 and how I will program them for different athletes based on the context of their goals and needs. So the first benefit is we are able to increase time under tension pretty seamlessly throughout a set, which can then drive mechanical tension up. We know that mechanical tension is a fairly big driver for hypertrophy. So if we are able to increase our effort and time under tension to create more mechanical tension during a set with 1.5 reps, it can be a fantastic tool for hypertrophy. The second reason I love using 1.5 reps for different athletes is just movement competency and movement mastery. If I'm working with somebody who has, let's say, discrepancy coming out of the hole in a goblet squat, or let's say they have discrepancy in their lunge patterning or split squat patterning for that matter, using a 1.5 rep can be a great tool for helping them slow down and really master some of those mid-ranges of motion that they may be falling short on. So if somebody, for example, doesn't understand what it's like to maintain a certain hip and torso angle coming out of the hole in a goblet squat, using a 1.5 rep is a nice means for helping them target a very specific area of that movement to increase their competency and awareness in that movement. The third reason why I love 1.5 reps is that when we have very strength specific goals, or if we're starting to move towards a very direct goal for a movement and we are trying to increase our performance. So if we're falling short in a very specific area, and I love to use the bench press as an example here, so we can look at like if you're weak off the chest, using a 1.5 rep is going to be a fantastic tool for one, teaching you how to control that initial eccentric coming off the chest, and then also controlling the second eccentric coming off the chest. So if we're trying to target very specific ranges of motion that correlate with our goals when it comes to performance, 1.5 reps can be used strategically to do so. Now, obviously they're not going to work for every single movement, but those are the 3 benefits that I like for 1.5 reps for. They need to scale based on the context of our situation, but those are 3 benefits that I love them for. So when it comes to programming 1.5 reps, there are a couple things that I think are important to keep in mind. So number 1, they can be used by any level of lifter and athlete, in my opinion. We just have to be very strategic with what exercises we are plugging in. If, for example, a beginner doesn't even have the basic patterning down for an exercise, then using a 1.5 rep may not be the best tool. If they are on the cusp of understanding it and there is just one specific part that they may be falling short on, then we can use 1.5 reps for that population. So we just have to understand the overall competency that somebody has for different exercises when using 1.5 reps when programming for beginners. Another thing to consider is that not every single movement is going to work with 1.5 reps. So as a general rule of thumb, oftentimes exercises that have a very clear eccentric and concentric movement pattern will be much better served with 1.5 reps. So a good example here would be you're probably not going to use 1.5 reps for something like a deadlift that is mostly concentric, so aka the lifting portion. Wouldn't make a lot of sense to start that lift, stop, go back down to the floor, and then try to reinitiate the movement. What would be the actual goal there? There are better ways to train breaking the floor, and we're not going to really try to cause high levels of hypertrophy in a deadlift by using a 1.5 rep. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So understanding that 1.5 reps will usually be best for exercises with a clear eccentric and concentric movement pattern will be a much better means for using them strategically in your program. Another thing to think about with 1.5 reps is that they can be really beneficial for when we don't have additional weight and we are trying to increase hypertrophy and strength. They can be a fantastic tool for increasing effort without necessarily increasing load, and that can then have carryover to different adaptations. So as a rule of thumb, those are my 3 big things with programming 1.5 reps. So let's say you are ready to use 1.5 reps, or you have found a strategic means to plug them into your program, or you just want to start trying them out. What are some mistakes to avoid? Number 1 is to start lighter than you think. Don't go super heavy. So if you are trying to implement 1.5 reps, scale back the loading a little bit and see how you perform your set with the additional ranges of motion added in. I can promise you that the 1.5 rep full ranges of motion are gonna sneak up on you quickly. So scale back your load a little bit. I think the first and biggest mistake is just loading heavily or going as heavy as we can with our normal reps with 1.5 reps and thinking we're going to be able to perform the exact same amount of volume. Scale back the intensity. Trust me, do yourself a favor. The second mistake is not understanding the types of movements that they're going to be best served for. So that circles back to our programming point of understanding that generally movements with a pretty well-defined eccentric and concentric movement pattern will be better for 1.5 reps. So understanding exactly how you want to implement them and the types of exercises work best with them is going to be a good bet. And also, movements that you are trying to generate power and velocity with, 1.5 reps don't make a whole lot of sense, because when the goal is moving fast or just creating a lot of velocity, we don't want to have to slow ourselves down halfway through our full range of motion. The third mistake that I think lifters can run into with 1.5 reps is understanding and being objective with their movement competency when using this strategy. So what this basically means is that if you're a beginner, for example, and let's say you have the back squat or front squat on lock and you want to start playing with 1.5 reps, it may not be the most conducive to slap them on to a bigger compound movement like that. You might be better served using an accessory squat pattern, so maybe like something like a goblet squat or a front-loaded Zercher squat with a sandbag. That may be more productive, because if you are just now getting, like let's say, a bigger movement on lock, adding a 1.5 rep may not be the best means for ensuring that you're going to be competent across the board at different loads. So something to consider. I did mention that beginners can use them, yes, but also we need to remain objective with how we're using them. That wraps up this guide on 1.5 reps. They are one of my favorite tools for increasing effort across the board based on the adaptations and goals I am going for or working with clients to help them achieve. If you have any questions on this topic, hit me in the comments below, because I'm sure there are some areas that are still probably a little gray or fuzzy for you. So no worries there. Hit me down below. And as always, drop a like to the video, drop a subscribe to the channel. I'll see you guys in the next one.